So, good morning, everyone. First, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Joanne McPhee. I'm one of the academic liaison librarians at Brunel. I've been leading on liaison and introducing open educational resources or open textbooks more specifically to academics at Brunel. I'm presenting the session today with my colleague Helen. I don't know if Helen, you want to say hello?
I will say hello. Good morning, everybody. I'm Helen Moore from the University of Sheffield. I'm also a subject librarian and I support the faculties of engineering and science at Sheffield and help to lead the development of an OER service too.
So Helen and I are part of a team who've been exploring both the adoption and creation of open education resources at our institutions. At Brunel, our work is really focusing on adoption through reading lists, but I know Sheffield have also been doing lots of great work on the publishing side of things. So we are also hoping to look at that a bit later, but right now we're focusing on the adoption. Um, the workshop today is just designed to share our experience of what we've found to be an effective approach to introduce academics to OER. And it's a workshop model that's designed by the Open Education Network in the US. So we're going to talk a bit more about them in the workshop and later on. Before we begin, we just want to understand a bit more about people in the room. So we're going to run a quick poll just to know a little bit about your level of experience with OER. So hopefully you can see a poll on the screen now. Please let me know if you can. Um, if you don't mind just answering where you're at right now. So we're asking, have you run or do you intend to run a workshop on textbook adoption at your institution? Just give you a minute to do that.
I think everybody's
Okay.
responded, Joe. Can you
Okay.
see the results?
I can see the poll. Um, I don't know if somebody could just give us a thumbs up to let us know if you can see the results.
I can't
Um,
see the results or the questions.
okay, thank you, Dawn. Let's see. So, sorry, we should say that we are not as experienced with using Zoom as we would like to be. So, if we
Shall I
don't
end
always,
the poll and we'll see what happens?
oh yeah,
Uh,
let's
Share results.
okay. So hopefully you can see now. So it looks like we've got a, a sort of 50-50 split in the room, but most people either haven't got experience of running OER, so obviously part of the reason you're here, and some have got the intention to run the workshop, although they haven't started. So it looks like everybody's kind of in the at the same place right now that you're exploring whether this would be a good um, approach for you. So thank you. That's just useful for us to know um, what work that you've been doing so far. Okay, so what we're planning to do today, um, we're going to take you through the workshop that an academic might experience if they came to one of our sessions at Brunel. It's just to give you ideas for how you might introduce OER at your institutions. So I'm going to be presenting to you as if you're a Brunel academic, and because of this, I might be referring to some things that are specifically relevant to my institution, and I will also definitely refer to things that you already know as librarians or information professionals. So I'm sure that you know all about the challenges of provisioning ebooks at the moment, but these are really important things to make visible to an academic audience. Sorry, next slide, please. So our aim for the workshop today is just to bring you ideas or approaches that you might take away from the workshop. So we've provided some slides for you. We've already shared them with you. Those slides are shared by a CC by 4.0 license, and that means that you can take these away and modify or adopt them as appropriate. You can take away a single slide or you can take away a single idea or the whole deck. It's up to you if you find it's useful. But it's just to introduce you to the approach that we've taken that we found has been a useful way to engage academics with the idea of using open textbooks at Brunel. I should also say I'm really, really happy, although I'm going to be talking to you as if you're academics at Brunel, there will be some occasions where we might step away from that and ask you to participate in an activity, or I'm very happy, or we're very happy for you to unmic and ask a question or ask something in the chat as well. So please feel you can interrupt us through this and speak to us. So with that in mind, we are going to start with an activity. So next slide. Um, we just wanted to get an understanding of currently how OER are used in your institution at the moment. So you can either add in the chat or you can unmic and talk to us directly, but we're just interested to know is it something that's on the agenda for your institution? Is there a lot of adoption? Are you publishing? What is the current um, feeling or attitude to OER, and where are you as well would be useful for us to know. So please either, and we'll give you a moment to write as well. Okay, so Rebecca, you are at the beginning of it and you're just looking for information. What institution are you at? Sorry, I can't tell from the email.
Oh, sorry, yes. I'm
Yeah,
from Cardiff University.
Cardiff, okay.
Mhm.
At the moment, is it just you alone, or is it something that the library
Yeah,
services are
kind of
interested in?
sort of researching and sort of finding out lots more, and then I'm going to take that to the appropriate groups, managers in the organisation. Yeah, so I think I'm nearly there with that, and I think there will be a lot of interest in it. It's just I just need to pull it all together really and start kind of making a case. Yeah.
Do you know what kind of thing you're interested in? Is it to have more usage of OER at the institution, or you're looking at publishing?
I think initially, I think we started at this from the sort of publishing side, but I think the more I've learned about it, I think maybe we would start from the not purchasing, but the acquisition side. But I think we would like to raise awareness of both and try and bring it into the conversation more with our academic staff, to encourage them to include them on lists, but also to consider their own practice, in publishing.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful if you can do both at once, because they definitely
Recommend
go
that, would you? Yeah,
well if you have the capacity to do it. But
yeah,
I certainly think we've found that the publishing side of it isn't something that we have built the expertise for at the moment. But like we're looking to do that in future. Um, so I think the adoption side is maybe easier to do at a smaller scale, maybe because you don't need
yeah.
such extensive resource around it.
That's helpful
Um,
thinking.
yeah. Sorry. So I think we've got quite a few more comments. So I just want to go to so Dawn, you've mentioned you're cautiously exploring. I like the word cautiously. So I guess that means that this is very new for you right now, in terms of what um, you're looking at. Um,
Yeah, that's right. We've sort of initially I'm from the university press, we were exploring it
Oh,
from
uh-huh, uh-huh,
my side of things.
uh-huh.
But after some initial exploration, I don't feel that it's a good fit in terms of from the publishing side of things. I have to agree. I think it's more of a acquisition thing at the moment for us, but we're just sort of trepidatiously exploring how it could work for us at the minute, but very early stages.
Okay, thank you. Um, oh, so at Lancaster, Tom, you've got some researchers who've published, so that's interesting. Have they published independently of your team, or um,
Yeah,
have you been working with them? Mhm.
they publish with external publishers. We don't have a press at the university, and they've been original works that they published open access, so they haven't taken existing materials and with an open license and remixed them. They've been more kind of the original scholarly works that they've decided to make open and that have more of a textbook aspect to them. And yeah, we're kind of in the early stages of thinking about how can we support more colleges to publish open textbooks, but also how can we link up the publishing of open access to what we use in our reading lists, and kind of how we join up our kind of open access side and our acquisitions, and kind of how we and what that process looks like. So we're still very much exploring at the moment and just trying to see what our options are, and kind of what avenues we could pursue, really.
It's really exciting that you've got some good examples already in the institution, though. But you're absolutely right. It's good that if they can be working together, like, so making use of and making visible to you like the work that's going on, because they'll be real advocates as well, I would imagine, for.
Yeah, we're quite lucky. We have a few colleagues who are really kind of big on this and are fairly big advocates. So I think it's just a case of thinking what should our strategy be in terms of developing that into something a bit more wider scale. Um, so yeah, we're kind of just looking for ideas at the moment and thinking what's realistic and what could we do at Lancaster. So yeah, still very much early days.
I know that, well, Helen at Sheffield, I don't know if you want to speak a bit more on the publishing side of it. I know you've done a lot more in that area.
We have done more in that area. I must admit I've found it a bit frustrating at times because we've been pushing the open textbook adoption, and the message that our academics seem to be taking away from it is we've got all this material, our teaching materials. It wouldn't take much to turn them into an open textbook. Let's publish our own. So we do have a Pressbooks subscription to support them. And I do understand that tension between the kind of university press and maybe our Pressbooks network. So we've got the White Rose University Press, and they will publish textbooks, but traditionally they've been more interested in publishing monographs. And there's a very clear distinction between what they do at the White Rose University Press and what we do with our Pressbooks press. We are very much a DIY system, in that if you've got the interest, the enthusiasm, the energy, and the resources to want to publish something, then go ahead and do it, and we'll support you with things like the metadata, copyright advice, that kind of thing. But other than that, we expect our authors to just do it themselves, really.
I think that's like a big concern for us about how much support that we can offer in terms of the publishing side of it, like the editorial and like discussions around that as well. But I hadn't realised quite the distinction between the Right Roads and the Sheffield the Pressbooks publishing um, until now. It's interesting for me um, to learn. Um, so sorry, I better go back to all the lovely comments. So Jane, you've mentioned you're keen to develop and promote it, but you're very much at the beginning um, of the journey.
Yeah, similar to others really. So we at quite a senior level. Well, so I'm in the discovery and resourcing team. I'm the discovery and resourcing manager. So we're sort of coming at this from the acquisition side, as some others have said, and looking at the vast amount of money we spend on e-textbooks, and you know, and our acquisitions are driven by our reading list. So we really are at the stage where we want to be engaging with the academic community about the possibilities around adoption. But I think, as others have said, as soon as you start talking about that, I think there's then the conversation that happens around creation of material as well. So, but the good thing is here is that this is on our sort of strategic plan at a departmental level. So, you know, my boss, who's on the exec team, has started to go to some quite senior learning and teaching meetings at the university, and, you know, sort of engaging program manager level about this, and everybody sounds really keen, but, you know, we haven't done that next stage yet. We haven't actually engaged any academics who are actually saying, okay, yeah, well, we'll swap something or we'll create something, so we are just talking about it in theory, gauging interest. People seem interested, but we haven't gone any further than that yet.
I think though that's super important to have that sort of voice at the table as well, to be talking about it, and also to have the support of the senior management, because these kinds of resources, they do meet so many of the institutional aims, but like making people aware of them is like a huge challenge. So so yes, that's great if you've got that kind of strategic route through to talking about them, I think.
Hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And Amy, you are also at Northumbria University, so I guess in a similar position to Rebecca. Um,
Yeah, that's right. So I'm one of the coordinators in the collections team. So I'm sort of working with my line manager who's quite interested in sort of looking at OERs, but we're really at the beginning. We've sort of not really done anything formal as of yet.
well, hopefully today will give you some thoughts on how you can begin that conversation, and um, some things to think about. I think it's just really interesting talking to everybody else and hearing um, where everyone else is at and what direction they're going in as well.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, and Graham, you're also similar. Um, so talking to them both about using OER, but also about OER creation um, as well. Do you have any sort of publishing capacity at the moment, or?
Well, not at the moment. We've got a press at the university, so they operate as a traditional press at the moment. So we're in ongoing discussions with them around how they can assist, and whether, I guess the experience you've mentioned, Helen, around the sort of library involvement and the DIY publishing versus a sort of the professional input, and how we can harness the skills they've got to help us move forward with this agenda is quite interesting for us.
I think it does sound like everybody's in a kind of similar point at this, but that's also like really exciting as well. I think that um, all these possible directions you might take it in. Okay, thank you everybody. That was really great um, for sharing that. So I'm just going to move on to the next part now. So Helen, if you don't mind clicking on to the next slide. Okay, so before we go into the workshop itself, I just wanted to provide some context. As I said, the workshop is adapted from an approach devised by the Open Education Network, which Brunel is a member of. Their workshop is designed to address academic misconceptions about open textbooks, as well as make them aware of the extent of resources available. So you can see on the screen here, it's just a little screenshot of the 3 elements of their workshop. So step 1 is to introduce the Open Education Network's Open Education Library, which is their site, which they, if you're not familiar with it, where they might find open textbooks and take a look at them. The second stage is within the workshop to discuss some of the barriers that commercial textbooks might present to both students and staff. So it's very much set up as presenting the issues first, and then it suggests open textbooks as an answer to address some of those issues. And the last step of it is to ask academics to review a textbook on the Open Textbook Library. So to go in to register and to provide a review that's added to the Open Textbook Library, so that they are engaging with an open textbook in a really active way. So at Brunel, we haven't been requiring them to review the textbook, but we are using the other elements of the workshop. So we're just asking them to look at the Open Textbook Library so they can see the scholarship and see the availability of the books, with a view of adding them to the reading lists. Next slide, please. Just a couple of things to note. We have delivered the slides after adaptation for the UK HE system, so more specifically, obviously, for Brunel. The provision of course textbooks is slightly different in the US, I'm sure you're familiar, but students are expected to purchase their own core textbooks in most institutions rather than access them via the library. So we have opted to refocus some of the financial discussions that are present in the Open Education Network original slide deck, and we have a slightly different emphasis on affordability in relation to library budgets and publisher pricings, as opposed to students buying their own text. We have obviously also aligned it to specific Brunel policies or values or initiatives, which you would want to look at in your own institutions and geographic contexts. We've also tried to make examples of research in the presentation as UK relevant as possible, so they speak more to our academics, but that has only been possible in some limited ways, as there isn't maybe enough research at this point, which is exploring the impact of how OER can improve the outcomes of UK students right now. So we have still had to rely a little bit on the US research. Next slide, please. Although we are meeting for 90 minutes today, that's just to allow time for a few more activities and context and questions. The session that I'm about to present is only designed to last 1 hour. So we have been able to be fairly flexible with when we offer it. I've usually offered it during lunch times so that academics can attend. I've offered it both as an in-person and online session. Personally, I like the interaction of an in-person session more. I found it works much better for discussion with academics and to make those kind of connections, but both have worked if you do prefer to offer it online. The aim of our session, as I said, we're not asking them to do anything more than consider open textbooks as a potential resource for reading lists. So we're just looking to encourage them to adopt open textbooks in the reading list. We're not requiring them to write a review or to go and publish or amend a resource or anything at this stage, although we would like to look into the publishing at a longer term. In terms of the outcomes, we are just measuring attendance at this stage, and we are trying to keep track of adoption on our reading list. So we've had good feedback from the workshops. We have seen an increase in our open textbook adoption, although that is obviously not solely as a result of the reading list. That's also part of all the liaison work that the library has been doing in promoting these resources more widely as well. Okay, so I'm going to start the session properly right now. I won't introduce myself again, but I would normally in the session. But I will be addressing you just as a reminder that as if you've been working or you're working within a Brunel context. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining today. I'm one of the academic liaison librarians at Brunel Library, and the library has been leading on a project exploring the benefits of open educational resources, more specifically open textbooks, as a potential resource for inclusion in the teaching and learning. The workshop today is designed to give you an introduction to what open textbooks are, their benefits, particularly how they might help you address some challenges your students might experience in accessing the learning in the classroom. We're also going to discuss how you might find some materials that can work with your teaching. We believe at the library that including this type of resource offers the opportunity to create more accessible and inclusive learning environments. In the longer term, open textbooks may also offer some alternative routes to publishing, reflecting a more diverse set of voices and perspectives in the reading materials. I should mention that the workshop today is based on a workshop developed by the Open Education Network, a member organisation which develops community and practice in the use of open education resources, and I'm going to speak more about them in a moment. Next slide, please. So what we're going to cover a quick introduction to the Open Education Network and how our membership of the organisation can offer benefits to Brunel. We're going to look at some of the problems our students are facing, which students might be facing when accessing reading materials, and how they can prevent them from participating in learning. Helen, the slideshow is just pause for a moment. Sorry. So just as a response to that, we're also going to explore the potential solutions that open textbooks might offer in addressing these challenges. And then we will think more practically about what we can do and how we might find and use open textbooks. Okay, next slide, please. So to begin, I wanted to define what I mean by open education resources, or OER. So we've got a very commonly used definition of OER on the screen here. So OER are teaching, learning and research materials that have an open license applied to them or are in the public domain. And as the definition mentions, what constitutes an open education resource might include a broad range of materials and formats, and that might be from individual learning objects like a worksheet or an activity or tests or lecture notes. It might extend to a chapter or a book, or it might be something much larger like a whole module or a syllabus. So open education resources might take physical format, or they might be digital, they may even be software. They are available at the point of use at low or no cost. They're not limited to those that are registered in an institution, and they might be accessed by learners at any time. The open license is what makes them different from traditional published resources, as it makes it possible to remix or adapt or keep or share the content depending on the permissions, although some acknowledgements might be requested. So when you are looking for open resources, look for a license that should indicate how you might use the resource. Open textbooks are one type of OER. They are academic textbooks that are published with an open license that is freely accessible to all learners. In some cases, they can be adapted and curated if the license allows. We are going to concentrate on open textbooks today, but much of what we are saying applies to open education resources more generally as well. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we are a member of the Open Education Network, or the OEN. The OEN is a community working together to inspire and facilitate the use and publication of open educational resources in education. So they're based at the University of Minnesota's Centre for Open Education, and they have a membership of around 1,800 colleagues in universities. They're mainly in the US, but they also have membership in the UK, Australia, Canada, and the EU. And they offer a community of practice. They also offer professional development support resources, and they have an infrastructure which supports the adoption and adaptation and all of the pedagogy and publishing around open educational resources. So Brunel is the second institution in the UK to become a member, and we're really keen to share some of the new knowledge and resources with you. We have already benefited from the community of practice, and we've been trying to share knowledge of that with other UK and Irish institutions about the work we're doing at Brunel. The workshop we're running today is based on an approach the OEN have developed, and we'll also be looking at later the OEN's Open Textbook Library, which is one of the major repositories for open textbooks that we've discovered. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just to talk briefly about where we're at the institution with OER. Currently at Brunel, we have a fairly mixed picture in terms of the adoption of open education resources. So you're already familiar with the publication and the use of open access resources as part of your own research. In particular, we have lots of journal articles that are being included on reading lists and in teaching, and we make sure that we flag and make visible these materials on our online reading list and our discovery layers. While open access articles are available to a public audience without a cost, even though they have the word open in the term, the copyright of the open access journal often still lies with the publisher. They're not usually published with an open license that allows remixing or adaptation of the work. So we wouldn't really officially class these as open education resources. We do have evidence of use of open education resources as we develop our programs, in particular our online programs. We've been able to create wholly digital reading lists that incorporate OER and open access materials to help students access the learning in different geographies or environments, so particularly with our transnational education programs or our wholly online MSCs. Some adoption of OER might be more hidden. They might be used within a particular course or a programme, and they are added to the resources within the VLE, but they're not more shared more widely with the library. Within specific disciplines, we have recorded some adoption of open textbooks and reading lists. In particular, we've had a lot of growth in areas like psychology, computer science, and engineering, and there's been a lot of independent academic adoption of open textbooks suitable for those areas. But I would say that this isn't the norm across the institution, and most of the textbook choice and reading lists are currently commercial academic textbooks that are available from major publishers. So despite the benefits, we feel like considering an open education resource for teaching and learning is not the default, and that's one of the aims that we want to address with this workshop. Next slide, please. At the moment, there isn't an institutional approach to the use or publishing of open textbooks or using OER in the teaching and learning, although the library is currently working on a policy with the Pro Vice Chancellor for Education, so look out for that soon. However, adoption of these resources can still be guided by the universities wielding a world-class difference strategy more generally, as it aligns with the different institutional aims, so to create learning environments that are accessible and inclusive to learners, because these resources can be accessed without barriers like payment. They also offer the potential to create more equity in the classroom, as they also offer the opportunity to introduce more diverse representation and voices in the learning materials. So the inclusion of this type of resource offers benefits to the institution, to you as an academic, to the library, and most importantly to the students. So we're going to look at some of these opportunities in the session today. Next slide. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted to discuss were some of the problems that we are trying to address. So what the issues that are facing higher education at the moment. Next slide, please. So I think most of us would agree with the aspiration on this slide. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that higher education shall be equally accessible to all. And I personally see education as a way to help empower our learners. I want them to be able to use the knowledge and the skills that they have gained to participate ethically and effectively in society and in our communities. However, I also see that our education system is structured in a way that often serves to reinforce social inequality. Unfortunately, we know that equal access to education is hindered by many barriers. Barriers to access, affordability, and inclusion exist. So I just want to talk briefly about some of them now. Next slide, please. One of those barriers is the cost of participating in education, not simply the cost of paying tuition, but the everyday cost of living and studying in the UK, and particularly in the London area where Brunel is based. We know that our students pay high costs for rents, high costs for transport. Price increases are affecting how students are participating in the learning. The Sutton Trust, you can see on the screen here, found that many of them are making difficult choices about whether to work more or eat less in order to keep at university. I'm sure you're aware that many students have additional jobs or caring responsibilities alongside their studies. That means that they are making difficult choices, and in the report, the Sutton Trust in 2023 reported that students are cutting down on non-essential spending, including the purchase of learning materials like textbooks that help with their education. As much as possible, the library will try to make essential reading available for students so they can share access to the readings, but the reality is that we might not be able to provide a copy of a text to every student, and those that can acquire their own materials might be at an academic advantage. Next slide, please. So at Brunel, we aspire to having a culture where everyone can participate equally in the learning, but perhaps we should also consider the message that we send out to students in terms of who belongs and who doesn't belong when we include expensive texts on reading lists that might only be affordable to some student groups. There might also be a textbook that likely does not reflect any faces or voices or perspectives that look or sound like theirs. One of the recent projects at Brunel looked at how diverse and inclusive the representation and viewpoints in the textbooks that were used in the Department of Sport, Health and Exercise Sciences was, which is one of my um, support areas. That project group and the group comprised of both students and staff found the experiences of groups like women, disabled students, or those from non-white backgrounds were often relegated to a single chapter of an established commercial textbook. And there just wasn't enough diversity in the books, particularly in things like case studies or images within the texts. I think the combination of these financial barriers and the inability to see themselves in the curriculum can have a direct impact on students' sense of belonging, particularly those who come from non-traditional or minority backgrounds, which make up a huge part of Brunel's population. So these students might feel like they're not being seen or included in the classroom or in the conversation. Next slide, please. I also wanted to share some of the challenges the library is facing in making materials accessible to students. These challenges come from the financial climate and also from the direction that commercial publishers are choosing to take. So one aspect of this is the restrictive licensing models available from publishers, where the library can only purchase a license between maybe 1 to 3 students can read at the same time, or with only limited download materials. For me, one of the reasons that I became involved in our open textbook work is dealing with our online psychology cohort. I have a lot of keen students who want to access the learning and download the required reading chapters via assistive technologies or to make use of audio options. Um, but one particular publisher only offers a download allowance of 5% of the text, which in many cases isn't even enough for them to download one chapter of the book. I've had multiple appointments with really frustrated students who might also have additional learning needs, trying to work around or find ways to access the reading materials when really that publisher could just allow the students to access the book more freely. Um, this has driven me personally to explore other options that might improve the experience of those students. The cost of purchasing ebooks is also rising at a really inflated price. Some of the 3-user ebooks that we subscribe to now cost between £800 to £1,000 for a text that will probably be updated in a couple of years. We've also been unable to purchase some texts authored by academics at Brunel because of the unaffordable pricing. Publishers are increasingly not making ebooks available to libraries to buy in the first place. They prefer instead to sell directly to students or make them part of an ongoing subscription package that has a very high yearly cost for the library, and it doesn't give us perpetual access to the resources that we've paid for. You may also be aware of models offered by the publishers like McGraw-Hill or Wiley or Pearson, where the institution pays for a single yearly license for a whole cohort to have individual access to the text. And while we agree that students would benefit from individual cost-free access to book, this is not a sustainable financial model for the institution within the current publishing environment. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're just going to step outside the academic workshop. This is an activity that we would normally do in the session as well. We ask academics to share their experiences of using e-textbooks, which is often really interesting. But I just also thought we would do that with you as well. So we're just going to concentrate on the first question. what are the challenges within your institution of using e-textbooks in the teaching and learning. So again, please add in the chat or on mic. So just to be clear, I am asking you in real in real time to share as attendees of the workshop rather than academics. There, that we've lost everybody. Thank you, Jane. So you've shared that you've got a similar challenge, so the expensive licensing modules on a subscription basis. Yep, we've certainly faced that as a challenge at Brunel. And Amy, that's interesting. So you've also had to buy a whole collection where it's actually the whole collection isn't what you need. You only need some of the key readings. I think these are often like good discussion points for academics. One of the things that I've definitely observed is that, and I'm sure you have too, is that people aren't always aware of the issues around students accessing ebooks or the costs within the library. So one of the things that we found this workshop is really helpful for is to have those discussions and make visible that actually the textbook that an academic might be using, um, there are quite a lot of challenges involved with resourcing that. Um, okay, interesting. So Jane, you've mentioned around specific areas. I certainly we have similar things with law and medicine where we've got some packages that we have now made available, some textbooks that it's very difficult to move away from that kind of thing as well. Okay, so Tom, you're in the open research team. So yeah, so you're experiencing it as well, even though you're not part of that, but it's really important for you to um, share that information. And okay, so it sounds like you're all sharing our pain in terms of the current provision of ebooks. So I think one of the things that we're sort of conscious of is that for us to be able to make these challenges visible to publishers, academics have got to be aware of, because they're the ones that are having these conversations with publishers. Often the reps are um, contacting them directly, so the academic is good for them to um, have had some discussion on this and to be talking to publishers as well about some of the challenges that the library are facing too, rather than just recommending materials to us. Okay, so thank you. I'm just going to move on to the next section. So I've got a few more slides and then I think Helen's going to take over. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so there's one more barrier that comes into play that we haven't really discussed yet, and that is copyright. Obviously, copyright is important, and the law is very important to protect the creator's rights and their profit, but it wasn't really intended to help people who want to share their work. And as I've spoken about, it limits how much of a work can be both downloaded or shared internally or out with the institution as well. So it isn't always sufficient in the case of open education resources. So in this instance, we need, and next slide please, is the Creative Commons Creative Commons is a non-profit organisation that created licenses to help people who do want to share their copyrightable intellectual property. So when you see a CC symbol on a work, and that might include some of the open textbooks you're going to be looking at today, it means that the creator of the work intends for that work to be freely used and shared. In some cases, it might also mean that they want it to be revised and remixed as well. Next slide, please. So you can see here the 4 license components of a Creative Commons license, and that is CC BY, which is related to attribution, which means that you acknowledge the license that is shared with and the creator of the work. CC non-commercial, which means that it can't be used for a commercial purpose. SA means share alike, which indicates the altered work must be shared under the same license as the original work. And ND means no derivative, which means that there's no modification or alteration of the original work allowed. So what you'll find is that Creative Commons licenses use a mix of these components, and if you can understand the different components, you can understand the 6 Creative Commons licenses, which are a combination of these. So just to illustrate that, we have on the next slide, please. So you can see on the graphic here how these 4 components might be used in combination to create the different licenses. So when I say an open license, I do mean that it's free at the point of use, but with permissions. So when each of these licenses are applied, anyone can view and download the content freely. In licenses with the ND component, the Creative Commons license grants the ability to, have I got that right, to update the content, customize and improve the content. But really the one that we most want to see is CC BY, which allows for all areas. So just the CC licensing mean you can copy and share with students, keep or use the contents, and in some cases remix and modify the original work. This is where we see how open textbooks and open practices address some of the issues we've talked about earlier, so around the affordability, the inclusive curriculum. So if we're allowing users to engage with content in different ways through this licensing, we might get closer to achieving more equitable learning outcomes. We do need to be careful though that open is not free. These texts are authored by academics, they are supported by publishing presses, and that takes time and resources to achieve publication as well. So somewhere there has been a cost along this process. They're free at the point of use, but that's not necessarily free completely. Okay, so next slide, and I think am I handing over? Yeah.
Thank you, Jo, and apologies for the interruption with the slides earlier on. Just a technical hitch. Okay, so as we consider the issues we've discussed around affordability, access, lack of diversity in the curriculum, and whose knowledge is valued in education, I'd like to look in a bit more detail at open textbooks. So what they are, how they're helpful, and while they do present an opportunity for us, they're just one of many solutions to the challenges that we've outlined already. So we're not proposing open textbooks as a one-stop solution, but rather another tool that you can put in your resources box to address educational equity. So what are open textbooks? Well, the commercial textbooks we generally buy only provide students with access while they're registered with us at university. There's no access prior to registration, there's no access after graduation. And in contrast, open textbooks are licensed to be free forever, and they're available to prospective students, to our graduates, and to the wider community. This is just one example of an open textbook here. It's been created by a University of Sheffield academic, and it's been submitted and indexed in the Open Textbook Library. So from the screen on the left-hand side, you can clearly see the format the book is available in, and you can also see the conditions of use and the Creative Commons license that Joe mentioned earlier in the bottom left-hand corner of the screenshot. So this license allows you to download, to share, and to modify the content to suit your needs. We're often asked, where do we find these books? And a good starting point is the Open Textbook Library. The Open Textbook Library is a catalogue of open textbooks, and it's based in the US. North America is streets ahead of the UK in terms of open textbook use, and therefore many of the examples you will come across will be authored in North America. We're also asked if they're any good. The Open Textbook Library encourages people to review the books in the library, and there are currently reviews for about 2/3 of the textbooks that are indexed in the collection. The Open Education Network, which runs the Open Textbook Library, focuses on honest reviews, so they're not looking for good reviews. Even if a text doesn't live up to expectations, an honest review will tell teachers where things can be improved. Obviously, with an open textbook, you're able to copy the text and edit it so it does suit your individual needs as well. I guess there could be potential bias in the reviews, in that reviews are drawn from academics based in institutions which are members of the Open Education Network, although the academic might not necessarily be an active member of the OER community. Is there an academic impact? Well, there's very little research based in the UK, but we have found some research that was done by the Open University in 2015. The OER Research Hub, based at the Open University, worked with collaborators in North America as well as the UK, India, and elsewhere across the globe. And they looked at all levels of education, including higher education. And they posed a number of hypotheses related to OER. So their initial hypothesis was that the use of OER leads to improvement in student performance. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the results from educators, and on the right-hand side, you can see the views of students as well. So while the increased student performance, educators gauged that to be around 44%, that they agreed that there was an improvement in student performance. There are other aspects of this that I find quite interesting. So, for example, you've got increased student experimentation with new ways of learning. Students are more interested in the subject as well than they might have been otherwise. And students were generally more satisfied if there was inclusion of open material in their reading as well. So it's not only about student performance, but also about the wider student experience. This is another study here, a very large-scale study. It involved nearly 22,000 students, and it looked at the level of course level adoption of OER. And the courses that adopted open educational resources saw a significant positive grade increase and a significant decrease in those lower grades with D, F, and the withdrawals, W. This is obviously a US-based survey. There's a note on there about Pell eligible students, and Pell eligible students are those from low-income households, and not having money to buy course materials makes a big difference. Having immediate, free and forever access to course materials is hugely beneficial to those students. We can see here how OER addresses some of the issues around student sense of belonging and retention as well. So the use of open educational resources helps us to move closer to achieving educational equity in that access to course materials was broadened. It improved the academic experience of students in the study by having a positive impact on grades and enrolment, and it helps to keep the most marginalised students in the classroom. Okay, at this point, we're going to take a little break, and we would allow academic staff to go away and look at the open textbook library and just experiment and perhaps look at the broad disciplinary headings and see if they can find anything in their broad subject area. You're welcome to do exactly the same. If you've not looked at the open textbook library before, please do take a look. The link is in on the screen there, and just share any comments that you found in the chat. You're also welcome to unmute and just speak to either Joe or myself. And we've just set aside 5 minutes to do this. Joe, is there anything you want to add at this point?
The only other thing I would normally say to academics at this point as well is that even if they don't see anything within their own discipline area on the open textbook library, they might also want to take a look at the teaching and learning materials there. There's a lot of materials that might just support their own learning and development. So if you that might also be of interest to you as well. So if there isn't something within a discipline area that you're interested in, you might have a look just generally at those types of support. But we'll just give you a little moment maybe to reflect on the textbooks that you can see there. This will make a dynamic section of the recording. Okay, so I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or comments on any materials that they found on the open textbook library. A couple of things that I've had in the sessions, we've had discussions on the discipline coverage. So I think that is, if you are going to be running session of this nature and encouraging people to look here. That is certainly something that for some subject areas that there are more materials available than for others. This is only one resource, and one of the things that I always try and point out is that this is an ever growing area, and if there isn't something available on a discipline in a discipline area specifically, then perhaps it might be something that you want to look into developing with the academic. Another reflection that I have as well is that a lot of the content may be aimed at a specific level of readership. An open textbook library, a lot of it may be more introductory level texts. There might be less for um, perhaps postgraduate or postgraduate research levels of interest and discussion. And obviously, you'll notice that there's a lot of North American content at the moment. That is something that the community of practice in the UK and Ireland are working on at the moment to try and develop or isolate materials that will be most useful for within the UK and Irish education systems at the moment. So that's a sort of watch this space, but we're hoping to have a more visible selection of evaluated materials that will be helpful for um, our learners specifically. I don't know if anybody has any comments on anything they've seen. Or if you've managed to find any useful books. In fact, in the previous session that we were introduced to some useful books ourselves that other people had discovered and found, um, which was helpful.
I think, Joe, one of the things I've found is that people often are looking for a direct replacement as well, a kind of like for like, and they forget that one of the advantages of an open textbook is that they can take maybe a chapter from one book and a chapter from another and remix them a little bit. And it's getting that message across as well that it doesn't have to be perfect.
I
You
think
can
that's
take
definitely true.
elements.
Yeah, because a lot of academics have the textbook they've taught from, and they want to make that transition as easily as possible. So they're looking for the exact textbook really as an open textbook. But yes, like that is definitely something to emphasize that because of their nature, because they're free, you can take elements from one place and from another, um, and create or curate your own textbook. Yeah. So, Jane, we're in the short term, we're going to make, I don't know if you've attended any of the recent workshops, but in the short term, we're hoping to make spreadsheets available on the community of practice for the UK. I can't remember the exact title, community of practice for UK and Ireland. Um, we're hoping to make those spreadsheets that people share with us of textbooks that have been adopted within their institutions visible on the website. But at a later date, there's going to be a section of the Open Textbook Library that is specifically for the UK and Ireland. Because we've obviously like aware of the same issue that you've been facing in this. We want also to have content that is relevant for our student cohorts.
Yeah, I appreciate you all putting the time into doing that because we'll all benefit from it, won't we? So yeah, that's really good of you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know, Helen, if you have the link to the um, spreadsheet that we have right now.
I have seen that on the community
yeah.
of practice website. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
going to be improved. So we're asking people to look at their own reading lists at the moment and
Yes.
extract materials and share that more widely. So that's kind of ongoing. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to have a go at doing that.
Oh, good.
My
Okay, great.
colleague went to the workshop on Monday, so
Okay,
we'll see what we can do. Yeah.
excellent. Yeah, for those of you who didn't attend the workshop on Monday, we shared some practice about how to extract open education resources from reading lists that use either Talus or Leganto. So that might be something you might want to look into further if you've not. Okay, thank you. So let's move on. So next slide, please. Okay, so we've looked briefly at the open textbook library, but we have lots of other places that you might find open or open access textbooks on. Your choice of platform really will depend on your discipline, but you might find the OER Commons open textbooks a good place to start. It acts as a discovery hub for some of the other platforms listed here. Rice University's OpenStax platform has a large range of good introductory textbooks, and there's also some additional learning activities included alongside some of those texts. We have got more detail on these platforms on our Open Educational Resources LibGuide, which is available via the link on the screen, and that has some advice and links to these various platforms. I would say availability of materials does differ across the disciplines, so there might be more choice of open textbooks in areas like life sciences, maybe more so than perhaps in something like English literature or languages. So some work might have to be done in searching and selecting materials. However, as I said, the number of titles is growing all of the time. It's also useful to note that there is still a North American bias in some of the materials, which may or may not affect your discipline, but this is an opportunity as well. One of the things that we are interested in is the adaptation or publication of open textbooks. That's one of our aspirations. So we're going to talk briefly about that in a second as well. Next slide, please. Another question we're often asked is whether there's any additional learning objects included with open textbooks. I know that some of you already make use of things like question banks or instructor materials or other kinds of resources alongside the textbook that you use. I would say that just like commercial textbooks, when it comes to open textbooks, some do have additional materials and some don't. There are some examples here on places to find ancillary materials. So I mentioned OpenStax already, but they often have additional learning objects alongside. Some open textbooks have integrated H5P activities within the textbook itself. I actually, one of the presentations that I attended recently, one of the universities had done a great job on an academic skills textbook that had really kind of lots and lots of interesting learning activities throughout the textbook, which I think was a very exciting direction for open textbooks where they might go. And I've included some other options on the screen here, which shows where sometimes there's ancillary materials available as well. Beyond what we've already discussed, so next slide, please. You might also be interested to know we've been working with a new business startup called Scylla. They can use AI to map your module learning objectives or your reading lists contents to locate potential open textbooks and chapters that are relevant for your specific teaching. And that means that you don't have to check individual platforms and search them to find the materials. That does all the work for you. This might be interesting for you to explore. So we've been piloting this resource with academics in computer sciences and life sciences areas. But if you would be interested in learning more, please talk to your academic librarian about exploring this, or you can email the general inbox open textbooks at brunel.ac.uk if you want to discuss trialing this platform with your module as well. Next slide, please. And Okay, so we're just going to talk briefly now about some future directions with open textbooks. So we've been talking about exploring the possibility of finding and using open textbooks via either the Open Textbook Library or in other platforms that are available. But also we want to think more about going beyond adoption. So one future direction we'd like to explore is the production of open textbooks. So next slide, please. So I think we're going to have to coordinate this, Helen, and okay, so we've got a model on the left here, and that is representing how we assume publishing happens. So the publisher themselves invests in publishing a textbook, the student and the library might buy the book, and the publisher makes its money back and a profit, and then people get access. So I think there's a animation there. Yep. But there is another model. So if we can bring that up on the right. Yep. So that is when a college or university publish a textbook. So the university may pay the author upfront for their efforts, although there also might be a different type of support or reward. And that could be something like assistance with editing, student placements, or promotion recognition, for example. And I think there's another animation there. So the funding might come from different places, although I would say probably funding from external institutions like foundations is increasingly not happening. But this model allows the textbook to be free. It's available to be freely shared, copied, etc. with, again, animation, Creative Commons licensing. So in this model, the approach can be the same. It still needs the peer review, the copy editing, etc. But this open model also has the potential of addressing inequalities or inequities in the traditional publishing models. It allows us to have more influence on whose story is told and who gets to tell the stories. It allows for a more diverse audience who have the potential to contribute to the content creation process, and that might include things like student contribution as well. And it also enhances the diversity of publications. And one of the reasons why this slide is important is that we want to be clear that just because it is a free to use textbook, somebody has volunteered to peer review it, to write it, or to participate in that publishing process. Even though that's a free process, it's still going through all of these checks and balances before it is published as well. Okay, so next slide, please. So just thinking about the future, if we are going to go down the road of modifying or creating open textbooks, what other ways can open textbooks improve student success? And next slide, and I'm going to hand over.
Thanks, Jo. So here are 4 different ways that open education can improve student success. The first is through the ability to customize the content, the ability to contextualize the content, the ability to make the content more inclusive, and by providing opportunities for innovative pedagogy. So I'm just going to look very briefly at each one of those in turn. On the left-hand side here, we've got an open textbook for an introductory statistics course. And on the right here, we've got a derivative of the same book, and it includes content specific to learning statistics with spreadsheets. So it's an example of customizing the content of an open textbook to meet the specific requirements of the students. Thinking about contextualization now, on the left, we've got one of the OpenStax textbooks that Jo mentioned earlier. Really popular series, well used. And on the right here, we've got a Canadian edition. So the one on the left is authored by people from the US, And obviously there'll be some changes that for students that would make it more beneficial for students in Canada. So it might be around terminology, it could be around the measurements that are used, just the context of Canadian society. And then looking at inclusion, open education can also aid inclusion by diversifying and amplifying underserved voices. This openly licensed book is a modification of a science book, and it includes Indigenous examples from the communities living in northwestern North America. So the book centres an Indigenous perspective, and it's co-authored by an Indigenous scholar as well. Finally, looking at innovative pedagogy. So this is a model whereby teachers engage students as co-creators in knowledge and curriculum. On the left, this book, An Ecological Approach to Obesity and Eating Disorders, is the work of students at Clemson University's Public Health Science, in collaboration with Clemson Libraries. And on the right is a book written as a result of an interdisciplinary collaboration between a number of academics at the University of Sussex, and it's based on work done by students. So just to wrap up, we've got this quote here on the screen about the benefits of open textbooks, about the new relationship that can be created between students and the course content and teachers as well, and about the profound effect that the whole endeavour can have on the course. So if you're wondering what you could do to help move on the conversations around open educational resources and open textbooks, there's a number of options on the screen here. You could have a look at the Open Textbook Library and just see what exists already for your discipline and where the gaps are. You could consider writing a review as well. Obviously, most of the reviews within the Open Textbook Library are from within North America. So please do consider adding a UK perspective, and you can do that by contacting your librarian. Think about adopting an open textbook on your reading list, especially if it meets the needs of you and your students as well. If it's not appropriate, then don't adopt it, but do consider whether there are opportunities to modify a book as well, or perhaps take an element of the book and mix and match it with other content as well. And talk with colleagues in the same programme as you and across your department, just to raise more awareness about open textbooks and the possibilities that they offer. Okay, we've come to the end of the workshop and our library workshop as well. And at this point, we'd be happy to take any questions or just to chat generally for the remaining minutes that we have. Shall I stop sharing the screen at this point? I think I will do that. Okay, and thank you for your comments in the chat.
I don't know if anybody has anything they would like to add or share. We would be interested to know if you think the workshop approach would work within your institution.
We do have a second poll. Shall I run the second poll?
Yes, please. Yeah, so hopefully you can see.
Okay, so you should be able to see the results of that poll on the screen. So some of you, yes, you definitely would run the workshop. Obviously you would have to modify it to your local context. And then others of you would need a bit more support. And absolutely, I'm with you on that. I always try and rope in other people to help with that. I'm just going to stop sharing at this point. And I personally, I've found it helpful working with people like Joe, for example, and others from the community of practice, particularly as we're all starting out. It has been hugely beneficial to do that with others. But also there might be people within your own library, within your own institution, who'd be willing to help you out as well.
One thing that I was just also going to mention is that we're keen to have a community of people who are developing and running workshops like this. We in future might contact you to offer the possibility of coming to another casual online session where you get to talk about where you're at right now. And perhaps if you've had the opportunity to run any workshops or any challenges or barriers that you might have faced as part of this. So it's very informal. It's not like this, like a proper presentation. It's just an online chat with other librarians who are in the same situation as you are. So please do look out for maybe a communication like that as well from us in future, because one of the things that we're really keen to do is learn from each other. That everybody's working on this together, and there might be some amazing things that you're doing that we can also adopt in our institutions as well. So yeah, so great. So look out for. We'll give you a little bit of time to absorb and to trial it out before we start bothering you. But yeah, so we've been trying to like start that as well, as a way of building more of a community of practitioners in this area. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. It was really nice, and I really, really appreciate you contributing to the session as well. Like, it's wonderful to hear your thoughts and voices on this as well, and it makes for a much more interesting session for us too. I hope that you feel like you've got something to take away from today. Like I said at the start, it might just be a single slide or one idea that you want to adopt, or you can take the whole workshop away with you and adapt it for your specific institution as well. And you might also want to talk to us individually as well if you do decide to do that. If you want to come and talk to us more about what you're doing, that would be very interesting for us too. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I don't know if Helen, you've got anything else you wanted to.
Nothing more to add. Just it's good to meet you all, and thanks for coming along and keep in touch as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody, and hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much. That was brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.